You forgot if you're right-handed or not. Is it running? Good. All right. Yay, technology. So today, we're going to do something we've done before. There's something called Sokuzan, sometimes Sanzen. A word for just basically just means to have an interview. And usually they're in private, and but sometimes we do an open interview or public so that people can get an idea of what transpires there between the teaching person and the learning person, teacher and student. So, you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Unyo.
So Unyo is my wife, and she's also a fully ordained monk. And so we've been having a conversation about a particular topic, and we thought this might be good to continue the conversation here so other people could not only listen to what the question and response is, but also so that possibly other people could participate a little bit or ask questions based on what they're hearing up here. So for a while, we'll just, Unyo and I will talk, and so we can start.
So as you mentioned, we've been, in the last couple of days, discussed, I guess, categorize it as reactions to negative emotions. And for me, particularly, the emotion of what I would call jealousy, but along with that is scarcity. And I'm thinking beneath jealousy, there might be something even deeper, maybe abandonment. So I'm hoping you can help me with that.
Specific question.
Okay. So when something occurs, and I'll give an example. There are times when I'm preparing food, and there may be for a certain number of people, but there may be others that come in and want to eat also, but don't really say they want to. And I find myself getting very protective of the food that we have. And sometimes I get really irritated about it. And
What's the question?
how do I work with that irritation around that?
What are you doing now?
Well, it varies. Sometimes I just sit on it and be irritated.
Okay.
Other times I might formally invite someone to share the food. Other times not.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I think what I'm looking for is when that feeling arises, what is the reaction that would be helpful?
Okay, so let's start with the word reaction. So the reaction is commonly used. How do you react? How do you react to this? And reaction is just reifies or validates that particular way of working with our world. Action, reaction, action, reaction. And as people who are interested in the spiritual path, in particular, an awareness-based path, there are others, but an awareness-based path where we're trying to understand with our awareness how things are actually functioning, how the mind actually works moment by moment, how it grasps, how it rejects, how it shuts down. And so the opportunity for you there, difficult as it may feel, is to actually observe and see the way in which you are reacting. In other words, something happens and there's something that comes out of nowhere, it seems. Something is triggered and then something comes and adds on to that. So the original feeling, the original, as Trungpa Rinpoche used to say, first thought, best thought, the original emotion that arises that has been triggered by maybe scarcity that you have to protect, is the idea is and this is very difficult to think your way into this. This is something you have to have a really strong awareness base. If you don't, you'll miss it and you'll jump right into doing what? Figuring it out, solving. This is something that in the world in general, in the 8 worldly dharmas of praise and blame, success and failure, and all this opposition and warfare that goes on in the world, most people are trying to do what? Solve the problem, figure things out. We are not, if I may speak for everyone here, which I am doing. We are not. What are we doing? We're trying to see what it is. We're trying to see what's the fundamental issue or problem or difficulty or stress or cover up. What's the original thing? So the way in which we do that, and there are different layers to this that happen as you go along, but that is to, as soon as you have the feeling, is to not add anything to that. And so, and of course, what we often do is we immediately start adding, just kind of almost a knee-jerk adding. What we do with that is then don't add to that. So don't double up on the negativity. If you have one negativity happening based on something being triggered, don't add more to it, trying to suppress it or keep it down. This is called aggression. And also all the 3 poisons of passion, aggression, and ignorance are also there more.
So when that feeling arises and I observe it, then what's the next step while observing?
To see, to allow the awareness, and this is painful, it can be very painful, and this is why when it's painful we think, well, this can't be right, this doesn't feel good. The tendency is just to get out of there, solve it, shut down on it, close off the pain, anesthetize ourselves, or somehow blame. That's one way of backing out. If you can blame what is happening on either on someone else or some other situation or on yourself, blaming this way also allows us to back away from the intensity of the suffering. Still suffering, but at least we're doing something about it. At least I know that I'm at fault and I'm such a terrible person. I have to stop doing this. I have to correct myself. Ego. It just reinforces the fiction, the basic fiction that we all deal with all the time, and that's belief in a separate identity that actually can win or lose, succeed at something, fail at something, and so on. So it seems that there needs to be an attitude, like we were talking about, or I was talking about in the meditation instruction, of just observing what's happening rather than jumping on board and trying to manipulate it based on what? Hope and fear, passion, aggression, ignorance, some kind of reaction that comes out that actually causes us to run away, you could say, from the problem into concepts or stories or blaming. In Buddhism, there's a slogan that says, all dharmas are without blame. It says you can't find first cause for anything. So when you see one person do something to someone else, even though there's some responsibility there, we're not saying that isn't happening, but we're saying fundamentally without blame. So we could go, let's go further into that part of it, of the separations between the two emotional states. Go ahead.
So the observing occurs. So I'm in the situation and I see what's happening. Yes. I'm observing. And then how do I know when I've totally felt that emotion without jumping to wanting it to be?
A good way to say it is that you really have a willingness to be upset and a willingness. One of the ways I say this also is don't believe your thoughts. Because if thoughts are arising, if the emotion is there, and then you add thoughts onto it, like I shouldn't, it should be, it shouldn't be, they did it, he did it, it's because of this that happened. Even if it's true, this is why it's so impossible for ego to understand this. But even if it's relatively true, it'll still cause you to go in circles. You'll still continue to come back around and suffer and feel good, and suffer and feel good, suffer and feel good. Have you noticed? So how do you work with this fundamentally so that there's some kind of equanimity, to use a fancy word, some kind of balance. This does not mean that you don't have emotions going this way and that way and this way and that way. You may have, once you actually open the doors, we talked about doing the opposite. So these concepts, what do we say there about closing the door? That was a good one. Did you write that down?
Well, you said wait it out, thoroughly wait it out. When the awareness sees, thoroughly wait it out, and
yes, hold your seat. Nothing lasts. So hold when the emotion arises. This is your opportunity to just be with that feeling of suffering or negativity or pain. And even though someone else might have triggered it, something they said caused you to go down into it, or something they did caused you to deal with this little area that's been triggered that's trying to get some kind of hearing. Don't believe it, don't disbelieve it. This is the difficulty. To believe something or disbelieve something is to work with it as if it were something true that you needed to push on or reject or look away from or make up stories about or figure out. So seems to be necessary to this is why Buddhism is called the middle way. Not too tight, not too loose. Go ahead.
Well, one of the responses you gave me earlier was if I believed my thought, I'd be a mess.
Yes.
But and you went on to say there's no home here for those
thoughts. I'm just using my own. I don't often talk about myself. I mean, not that I don't think I'm a wonderful person to talk about, but I can say that I don't. I've been doing this for a long time, and I no longer buy into or reject anything that happens in my mind. So therefore, everything thinks it's welcome, because there aren't any doors or windows on anything anymore. So everything is climbing in and climbing out. I have as negative thoughts today or yesterday or probably this afternoon as I had when I was 18. The negativity has not particularly decreased. I mean, in some ways, some places, some areas of it have completely decreased. But my relationship to negativity is no longer one of warfare. I don't fight with anything. And if I do fight, if I see myself starting to fight with something, I don't fight with that. So I don't suddenly think, oh, there's a warfare going on. I think I'm losing my equanimity. Like that. So what am I saying? Awareness. Bring as much awareness to anything that's happening in your mind, any struggle, any conflict that's happening. Please don't add to it. Don't believe it. Don't disbelieve it and try to get rid of it. Oh, that's not true. I need to ignore that or push it away. But don't shut down or stop observing or looking at it. And in that way, the ego mind that is just like a big ball of Velcro suddenly loses all of its hooks. They're just gone. There's no solid being there anymore. You're no longer trying to establish some kind of person who's going to win or person who's not going to fail or person who's not going to die. That's the big scary part. Is death. We kind of hide out from that. Well, I'm here and I'm going to be okay. I'm healthy. I've got a lot of years left. You guys can say that maybe. Yeah, I might have a few. So the experience of emotion coming through, even though it was triggered by something, that emotion when it comes through, wait it out. When I say wait it out, I'm saying it's like somebody comes to stay in your house who's never washed and is real smelly and is breaking all your dishes. Don't do anything about it. You don't need dishes. You can go get some more. When they're gone, you can open the windows and turn on the fan. I mean, it's an image, and I'm using that image because it's that kind of a feeling, isn't it? I mean, we all have that kind of feeling when something overtakes us that's been triggered by something happened here, and suddenly we're put into some kind of a funk, as it's commonly called. And what do? We fight with it. When I say fight, I'm not talking about this kind. I'm talking about we don't want it there. Or else, if that won't work, then we say, well, if they hadn't done this, we blame. This gives us a little bit of relief for something that is going to have to be looked at eventually, no matter what. You're going to have to see that negativity. Not easy. And the stories that arise that are triggered because or around the negativity are untrue. You can't have a true thought. You can't have a thought that's totally true. All thoughts are lies or untrue in some way.
So what about those residual thoughts then that, so the negativity arises and through we're endeavoring to observe.
Yes.
And then those little stories arise, like you just said, well, we can get more dishes. When is adding not adding?
Good one. So when the adding it just comes out of spontaneity, and then it's just more stuff that's coming and going, just like the first negativity that came. And then when you see that we can get more dishes, that's something that follows up. It's just like a low-level commentary. It's not exactly adding because you're not doing anything other than making an observation about it. But it's very tricky because when we try to stop doing that, then we get confused and think that our mind should be a blank. Not true. So what is the primary problem here? We'll go to that, and then we can come back to because what you're asking about here takes what has been called in the tradition discriminating awareness wisdom. It's the ability to see how the difference in the boundaries between things in a very, very subtle way. But the main thing that is the problem is we think there's a solid self, an ego that we have to defend. And sometimes it's so subtle that we can't even locate that. The only way we know that it's there is if somebody comes after us and we defend ourselves, and we can feel our self-centeredness. We can feel our defensiveness. Or if somebody criticizes us, even if they're wrong, even if they're incorrect, it doesn't make any difference whether they're relatively correct or incorrect. Your position, if you actually are sincere about your spiritual path, is to don't take any of that as you can't. It's not currency. You can't spend any of that. All of that is relatively beside the point. It has to be some kind of ultimate view. In the Buddhism is called, not to get too fancy here, it's called the two truths, absolute truth, relative truth. We're all dealing with relative truth all the time. But the insight that starts to arise from doing sitting meditation over a long period of time is we begin to see the ultimacy. And this ultimacy goes on and on as an expression of relative truth. So it's confusing because we want to buy into the plus and minus rather than see that the plus and minus is the same thing. They're two aspects of the same thing. Like they say, the coin. It's just goes on and on.
So is there a way to work with whatever negativity, whether it's scarcity or jealousy or abandonment, on the cushion as like a practice?
If it shows up, if you're meditating a lot on the cushion, there's a good possibility all you're going to see is a blank wall and just a few things flying by every now and then. But if it does, if jealousy or feeling of jealousy does come up in that area and you're able to see that or contemplate that, then just look at it. Just be an observer, insofar as you can observe. And a lot of the practice of observing is to see the way you can't quite observe, is to see the way you keep adding on and commenting on things. And of course, then you have to be careful to not try to stop the commentary, because then you have more aggression. So that whole duality kind of thing is very difficult as long as there's a self-centeredness that wants things a certain way, that wants success, that wants what it wants. It's the first noble truth of the Buddha is life is suffering, or frustration, difficulty, dissatisfaction. The second one is we don't like that. We want things to be different. And the cessation sometimes is seen as a cessation of the suffering. No, it's not the cessation of suffering. I don't care what the Theravadins say. It is a cessation of wanting things to be different. In other words, suffering comes, suffering. Suffering goes, it's gone. Happiness comes. We don't look behind that and see who's backstage. who's pulling the strings. We're everywhere. We're backstage, we're on stage, we're in the audience, we're in the lighting equipment, we're in the sound system, we're in the entire space around it. There's no place you can't. Once the solid separation has dissolved, you could say, or we've seen that it's untrue, then your consciousness just expands. And it doesn't really expand. It's never really been localized.
So sometimes on the cushion, I feel like I kind of prompt
Yes.
certain scenarios that I know can trigger my emotions, just to sort of test
Yes.
myself. Am I getting better? Is there any practical use for something like that?
You know, it would be difficult for me to comment for or against any of that. It's interesting, and I think sometimes, you know, we tend to test. We want to know what does it feel like to be, you know, no longer at war. What is this? Is there some way I can tell? And you know, in the Dalai Lamas, how do you know if somebody's awake? Because they're not at war. They're friendly with everyone, even the Chinese, friendly. No harsh words for anyone.
It just seems like there's some underlying desire to be different, to be able to have the situation be triggered and not have that feeling. I don't want that feeling.
Okay, the feeling, yeah, you don't want the feeling, and that's part of the
It's painful.
that's part of the passion. Not wanting that way, not wanting to feel that. And what cessation is or nirodha is, the cessation is about, not necessarily about suffering going away. It's just the desire to have things different than they are. So whatever comes, it's family. I don't care how long it's been since they've washed.
So is that something that you say to yourself when a negative emotion arises?
You might. There are ways of practicing, especially the 59 slogans of Atisha's 7 Points of Mind Training. There are slogans in there that say various things. Be a child of illusion. Drive all blames into one. In other words, take responsibility for everything. It's not that you're responsible nor not responsible. It's just that if you just begin to take responsibility for everything, you begin to see that's somewhat of an arbitrary position, the whole responsibility. Take the word responsibility, which is misunderstood, the ability to respond. It's not about blame. It's not about being responsible in the common understanding of the word, but rather that you're able to respond to something the way it is, the way it actually shows up in your life. Just like the gentleman that we had to go out during service and talk to about the installing satellite dish, and talked, and we looked at that the way it was, and you know, we said, no, can't do it. But there wasn't a lot of thinking about it. It wasn't like, it just was simple. Yes.
So just to go through the steps,
Yeah.
a negative emotion arises.
Yeah.
I attempt to just observe, feel that emotion fully. And then you were saying something about discriminating awareness. How do I know when it's
So if the awareness isn't busy in the thinking process and so on, isn't busy defending itself or justifying itself or trying to defend an imaginary self, if it isn't busy doing that, then the awareness can actually go down and look into what it is more with some kind of understanding of the way in which things are connected, the way in which things have a natural separation to them, or a natural, sometimes called natural hierarchy. Begin to see that things make sense in a certain way, that there is a hierarchy going on. But the hierarchy that's based on hope and fear and war and peace, you know, we see it all over the place. Watch television. There's a hierarchy going on that is really difficult. In other words, there are people in apparently high, powerful places that are have misunderstood the nature of this world and think that it's all about getting everything for themselves. So it's difficult. More.
I don't think so at this time.
So questions here, Sheldon?
When we have these negative emotion
Yes.
situations like this, it seems like the thing is that we're afraid that we're going to go beyond that point where we're,
Yeah.
we want to stop that
Yes.
from continuing on.
Yes.
If we're just observing, then we're going to not do that, right? We're just going to observe that emotion go through to whatever it comes to. So we might yell at somebody or just lose control of ourselves in some way. Is that true? Is that how that would work?
You might. Quite often, it's more the fear of doing that than actually doing it. It's more the fear of that happening. It may take some time to work with that in such a way that you realize after a period of time of practicing, you realize that you can really accommodate very negative emotions with stories attached to them, everything, and not do anything with it. When I say don't believe it, don't disbelieve it. It's very important to understand those two dynamics, not just, I don't believe that. I'm not talking, or well, that's something I believe. I believe that's true. I believe this. I believe that. Don't do anything with it. Live in what has been called an open dimension, where there is the plus minus, up and down, back and forth. That situation it takes care of itself. More. Okay, so other JD.
Well, can all these negative emotions be traced back to the three poisons?
Well, the negative.
I've got another question.
Yeah, well, the negative emotions are expressions of the three. We're either pushing or pulling, but as far as tracing back, the causes and conditions that create any kind of a situation, whether positive, negative, or neutral, it's so difficult to find the source. And it's not necessary to find the source. It's not necessary to go back and trace it down. And from the point of view of the sitting practice of meditation, you can actually do it by just insisting on seeing it, insisting on seeing what it is. Sit down and look at it. Yes.
And afflictions are endless.
Yes.
I vow to dissolve them all.
Yes. The vow.
What's that? That?
That means that you're going to look at them. And from the point of view of the teachings, you're going to see that they're unreal. This does not mean the example. I'm using this over and over. I'm going to have to come up with another movie guy. Let's see. I keep using Bruce Willis. I need to use someone else. Any suggestions?
Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Arnold Schwarzenegger. So just like Arnold Schwarzenegger, the former governor of California, is in a movie, and he's being chased by a robot, and the robot keeps reviving. No matter what he does, that robot, it just keeps coming after him. And we're watching the movie, we get very involved and very, we know it's not true, but there's something about it that's going on because it triggers emotions in us very similarly. And that's the way our life is like that. It's very much, there's a kind of an entertainment quality of that because we know it's not true. And yet we have this intense emotion that's not really true. Because after all, Arnold Schwarzenegger is an actor, and this is a movie, and we are watching a stage play or whatever. And our life is like that. If we begin to realize that, then we stop taking things quite so seriously. This doesn't mean that we dismiss something terrible that has happened and think, oh, that's just a cartoon, or this is not real. So no, we still. But we do it relative to what appears, just like our friend and Sangha member, Robert, who was run down in Kalamazoo by a hit and run and was still in the hospital. Then that's serious. You know, it's real in the sense that there's extreme suffering on both sides, the person who did it and the person that happened to it. There's really extreme difficulty there all the way around. And so what we do is we just look at it. We're just with it. We stay with it, with feeling and emotion and sympathy for Robert and his mate, Jay. And so I'm not saying oh, that's just a movie. We don't do that. So this is why in Buddhism it's called the middle way, not too tight, not too loose. Sometimes you have to go really deeply into something with a lot of emotion and feel. Very important to feel whatever arises, especially any intense feeling that arises. Don't do anything with it other than feel. Other questions for me or for you, Bailey?
How is trying to look deeply at something different than trying to find its source?
So good. And don't misunderstand. I'm not saying we shouldn't, in some situations, actually begin to look at the sources of things. You and I have talked about that some, to begin to look at what this is causing that. Maybe we need to look at that. But initially, what needs to be done as students of an awareness practice, we need to look at whatever is there, the surface of it, the texture of the surface, and go into that surface. So I would say the way we know when we need to go deeper is when the surface area is either confused or is not, or is suspicious, or is not, even though we've looked at it very carefully, there's something that's not, it's unclear about that. It's incomplete. There's something else going on. And so then you may, through the awareness practice, may go deeper. You may go deeper by working with your meditation teacher. There's lots of ways of doing this. When I say lots. I mean, you can even, there's nothing wrong, like with, if you're having a lot of difficulty with taking drugs, or giving, it's just nothing wrong with it. It's just that it doesn't look at the problem. It covers it up by relieving the discontent or the suffering or the anxiety or the panic and so on. It relieves it by covering it up. Yes, Michael.
For those of us who are new, can you explain again what an interview is? What happens when there's an interview? So
just everyone's different because usually we sit down in private instead of being like this open interview. We go in Hojo is the interview office, and I sit there, and the person comes in. We do what we did here. We bow, and then I say, "What's up?" And the person tells me what's going on, or asks questions about meditation. And everyone is so different. So I've never found similarities from one interview. One is all about this particular topic. Someone is just about somebody's relationship. Another that's just about someone's sitting practice. Another just about some kind of unnameable feeling or something that's happening that they don't know what it is. Or maybe possibly changing the meditation technique based on what I'm hearing him say, taking it from just shikantaza to maybe could be, counting the breath even. Could be some other way of doing it. I've had some people actually start practicing tantric visualization practices. Not common, but sometimes that's what seems to be helpful. So it could be, we don't talk about baseball. We don't know anything about baseball. So, but whatever it would be your interview. So whatever you would.
And when do the interviews happen, and how are they scheduled?
We have a board in the kitchen.
Okay.
People sign their name on there, and then somebody reminds me that there's a name up there, and then I find out, or you can call me, text me or something, and say I'd like to talk to you.
Okay.
Then we sit down and talk, and then it just takes on its own. We might have one interview. We might have an interview. I talk to some people at a distance on the phone quite often.
Okay.
It just really varies, and there's no fee for anything. It's all donation or dollar. Yes, goes on.
So I'm imagining Unyo's story in the kitchen.
Yes.
Sometimes you say, hold your seat or
Yes.
back up a quarter of an inch and
I do.
observe. And sometimes you also say, you may have to manifest your karma or be genuine. You might
Yeah.
have to be a jerk.
Yeah, you might.
So in a
Well said.
situation where something's coming up and you're feeling the heat and the tendency to go
Yeah.
off, could you be using the hold your seat or back up a little bit to ignore what you need to look at?
You could be, but just that you can ask that question tells me that you've brought a lot of awareness to that situation. It's always about awareness. It's never about the strategy to avoid or get better or get more enlightened. And you might find that it depends on who's there. That if you're really present, then the quality of the energy that you have between yourself and 2-3 other people might be such that you might say something, you might bark a little bit. But then, and I don't mean that this is some kind of scenario where you're trying to teach people things, but to people who are practitioners, they would have the opportunity to use that as a teaching. They could see that, however, they could just stay away from you. You know, go to the store or have lunch somewhere else. I mean, I think what I'm saying is to work with it as it is, and our relationship to people is always fluctuating and changing. And the good thing about Sangha is people who are really committed to this path, you're probably going to get, I mean, you might get in a different argument or just, misunderstanding, but it does not last very long. And it doesn't last very long because the person that you're usually, or people that you're engaged with are they're trying to do what you're trying to do, and that's see what is true and see what a person should fundamentally do rather than who's right and who's wrong. We just don't do that here. You can talk to any of the temple residents and ask any of them if any of them have ever been blamed for anything, coming from me anyway. We don't do that. On the other hand, if somebody is not showing up for this or that or the other thing, then I might talk to them and ask them what's going on, what's happening. So just like with the kitchen situation, the idea is to be genuine. So don't, if the feelings are really strong, you may have to express them. Whereas if you were, say, at your job, because you're in a different milieu, different environment with different kinds of energy there, you might pull back on that somewhat, or not. And so, but only you, this whole thing as we go along the path is the beginning of beginning to trust yourself. And when I say trust yourself, and the specific way I talk about that is to trust the space in which things show up or manifest. And unless you've sat and done sitting meditation for a while and actually experienced the space around your thought process to see that there actually is a space in which things occur and that you are not your thoughts. Their thoughts are something that they just come in. They're like sounds out in the parking lot. They just come in. You don't have to do anything with them. You're, as they say, you're a spiritual being having a physical experience. Yes.
How can you hold your seat and also trust the space of the activity that seems to be arising from you?
Yeah. And so I think it's the same thing because you don't want to misunderstand. Holding your space isn't like holding your seat isn't like this. Holding your seat may be just not separating yourself from the space. And that actually, to not do that is stillness, and it's also silence. But you have to do that. And what makes it difficult to recognize is at the same time that you're probably doing that, you might be really suffering. You might have really intense suffering. This is why in our lineage we talk about drive all blames into one, and we talk about taking on the suffering of others. And sometimes it is said, and I've said this to people and have done it myself, is when you're trying to deal with receiving, you're tired of fighting with yourself about something or some situation, just stop fighting with it. And you could even say, if you want to use the word accept, which I don't use often, but you might need to say, as I stop fighting with this, or as I'm with this, or allow this negativity to be here, Give me all the other negativity. Give me all the negativity with people in the same situation who are suffering the same thing. So let me extend my awareness out to others and help them. Sometimes call compassion. Not easy to do that, and you get no credential when you've done that. I'm certainly not going to compliment you, even if you tell me about it. And if you tell me about it, probably haven't been doing it.
Is it possible to hold your seat or wait at the same time when there's difficult emotions, thoughts, and activity arising?
Yes.
How?
By not pushing, pulling, or shutting down. And the only way you can refrain from pushing, pulling, and shutting down, which is called discipline, is to see the way in which you're undisciplined. You have to see the way in which you keep caving into certain kinds of thought patterns and emotions. And you cannot just have a sense of equanimity about it. You need to identify and think. The common way we hear people talk about themselves, well, I'm the kind of person that, likes to punch people when I'm unhappy. Or I'm the kind of person that likes to have a cigarette now and then. Or I'm the kind of person that doesn't like to have jobs. I'd rather just live on welfare. I'm that kind of person. Or I'm the kind of, or always have a little description going. Well, you know me, I'm always, well, you're always getting our identity from others. Don't get your identity from others. Find out who you are. Simply put, find out, yes.
How can you manifest your karma without claiming it as your identity?
Paraphrase yourself.
I'm the kind of person that does this. I'm manifesting my karma.
Stop it. Say more. I follow where you're going, but give me a specific question.
Well, you could say, if you could use the teachings of be genuine, or you may have to manifest your karma as an excuse. Well, it's conditioned. I'm just watching.
It's your awareness. Look how much awareness there. You're asking the question, but you have the awareness around that, so it's unlikely that that's going to happen with you. You're tracking it pretty close. I'm not saying other people might not have that, but you're tracking that pretty close. You're describing the condition that a person might have who has no awareness around that kind of mode of relating to what is arising in their mind or in the world. More.
It seems like the more we go on the path and we see that we have been ignoring or noticing space or more discomfort as you go, there's always a feeling like, I wonder what it is that I still don't see.
Mm-hmm.
So how can you see what you don't know you don't know?
See what's in front of you. If you're still wondering about see what I don't see, or you're still having any kind of wondering about that, you have not looked at what's right in front of you. And what I mean is your thoughts, the floor, the wall, other people, the room, the colors, the textures, the smell, everything that's here, your life, your dreams. Look at the contrast between things rather than the good, bad, correct, incorrect stuff. Look at the contrast between things. It's astonishing to begin to see that. And then everything starts to resolve itself. Longchenpa in the 14th century Nyingma monk from Tibet points to that over and over in his writings and his poems. Other questions for me or for about what's arriving?
Oh, wait a minute, we do have some.
I noticed that the gate out at the entrance, there's something's come loose at one end of the.
It's called impermanence. Yeah, we're working on it. Thanks for.
Okay, I just wanted to check to see if you had a plan.
We do. I don't plan. but I know a bunch of people who do. I get them to do it.
Because black paint on one end could just kind of make it look,
What,
and then tack down the rest of it.
yeah, what happened is it kind of, leaked and then,
Okay,
something happened. Yeah, there's actually another one that's completely formed, I think,
okay,
that Sokuzan's dad,
okay,
he built that entire
okay, that's
Tory
very
gate.
nice.
Yeah, and he has a new top for it. We just need to get it over from Detroit and install it.
That was a prototype and sometimes you gotta fail.
Figure out how to do it.
Yeah, I know, the pilot.
Yeah, that was a pilot program.
Yeah, it's entirely hollow, the whole thing. It's very light. It looks like heavy beams and everything, but it's like an imaginary Tory gate.
The other one's gonna be like a fiberglass boat.
That'll be like a fiberglass boat. We have a little sail on the top.
Do you ever have work days here where people come out and
We
do
do, you're in
manual labor?
We certainly do. Ask Lisa. She comes down every time we get Lisa's truck. We do. We had, in the spring, we'll probably have a really big, usually the all day sitting at the last Saturday of every month. There's a work period in the afternoon that lasts a couple of hours, so,
Okay.
yeah, if you'd like to, we'd love to have.
The last Saturday of the
Of
month.
every month. Sometimes it's the fifth one or the fourth one,
Right.
and fifth. So this one, I don't know.
That's March 26th.
So late in the afternoon would be a time when,
Oh, wait.
Yeah, but you should come in the morning and meditate.
I think it's like 1 to 3 is when we do
1 to 3. It's a quite, if we have 15 or 20 people here, it's we get quite a bit accomplished.
right.
Yes,
Maggie has a question.
Maggie,
If this practice does not decrease suffering, then what is the point of practice?
so Maggie, Maggie. We gotta have a talk when you get back from California. You have too much sunshine, this is what's bothering you. The point is, it decreases the suffering, but the way in which it decreases it is that the part of the suffering that is the kind of the creator of the suffering is the self or the ego, the self-centeredness. In the Adi Vijnana, it's the seventh consciousness of the klesha mind. And when that is seen through as being unreal, then when they talk about nirodha or suffering, it just means it stops in the sense that there's no one suffering. So then there's no solid being suffering. It doesn't mean there aren't emotions coming and going, but you don't take them personally. And also on this path, the Mahayana, once your own suffering has subsided, then you have the whole suffering world. This is why the Bodhisattva path is about saving all beings. We take the vow over and over and over. Yes, it does something with suffering, but not the commonly kind of 12th grade level of being, when I graduate, everything's going to be great. When I stop suffering, then everything will be fine. No, then you've got then because you've worked with your own suffering and you have actually decreased it, because the identity part of it has been has seen through as being unreal. And then you have all the people out there around you that are close to you that suddenly, now that you're not at war with your own suffering, you can see very vividly how much the world, everyone you meet is wound up in knots and is suffering. They might be hiding out from it. Sometimes we meet someone who smiles and is up all the time, but we can sense they're having some kind of difficulty deep under. And so I'm just changing the way it's understood. It's nothing new. I'm not the first one to talk about it like this, but it's just the idea that what ceases is the grasping, rejecting, and shutting down, the three poisons. That stops happening so much. So therefore, the suffering that arises doesn't belong to anyone. Doesn't even belong to the people who think it's theirs. More questions from Maggie? She's coming back here pretty quick.
Yeah, she'll be here Saturday.
We have some time. Further questions are good if you have them. Jason?
You had talked about not needing to find the source of
Yeah.
suffering. Is there a fundamental source of suffering?
Probably. There's sources for everything. So if something starts here and starts up and goes this way, and there's something that probably started, but to try to address your suffering necessarily by going into that on the cushion. I'm not saying that won't work, but we need to start by, let's look at the surface first. And that seems to be different. That seems to show up differently in every situation with each person. Some people just need to just look at their mind. They just need to just look and settle this soul situation by observing it, whatever arises. Other people might need to do something different. Other people might need to do other kinds of awareness practices. And, everything from, that's why some people do this and some people do yoga. I'm not particularly promoting yoga or not promoting it. I think if that's something you need to do with your body mind situation, then you should. So it's trying to work with it wherever we find it, which is the immediacy of it. And then if we need to, there are ways that we can drop back in and look at it and with more depth. One of the ways to go deeply into this is to go into retreat. If you go into retreat and you sit down, you hold very still for 8 hours a day for 10 days or 20 days or whatever it may be, you're starting to look at where things come from. Because every day you're coming back to that same wall, the same thing. You light the candles, you bow to the altar, you sit back down, you hold still, and you just observe. And doing that 8 hours a day over a long period of time without interacting with anyone. You've done that, so you know. And it's not that it is somehow easy, but it actually helps you to stop deceiving yourself. So you actually can begin to look at the situation as it is without adding a lot of little bundles of blame or explanations or additional things going on that confuse and muddy the water, as it says in Lao Tzu. Here's that saying that I copied from Dr. Palmer. Lao Tzu said, who shall make the muddy water clear? Let it be still, and it will clear. Good old Lao Tzu. Yes.
Is the self, the identity different than the fundamental source of suffering?
I think it's pretty complicated in that area. And I think that the complications, as we look, they get more and more and more spread out. So probably more.
You've talked about realization as being very ordinary, and many
Yes.
people talk about being very ordinary.
Yes.
Is there any way in which it's not ordinary?
It's only not ordinary in that you the ordinary part is you don't feel any difference, but the non-ordinary part is when you talk to people and you see that what you see is right in front of you. You can see it. You've been seeing it for maybe years, but others can't see it, and therefore they're wound up in themselves and they're fighting with themselves. So you just encourage people to see what is really true for themselves. Each person has to do it for themselves. Buddhism, the practice of the Buddha's Dharma is not a belief system. And I'm not saying that belief systems don't also have their path and that they don't also work, but they work in a different way. They don't deal with the fundamental grasping of the self. Buddhism deals with the fundamental misunderstanding that there's a solid being separate from this incredible reality that we all are part of. Whereas a theistic approach would be more of a supplication for someone to help you, which I'm not saying you shouldn't do that too.
Sometimes it seems that we look for what we've been told,
Yes.
like descriptions of realization. How should we look? In what way should we be looking so we're not stuck on what we've heard?
I think don't ignore what you've heard. Include everything, and don't necessarily narrow your view. Open it up, but the most important thing is to see what's right in front of you. Hear sounds, without anything extra. See carpeting, see people's faces, look at people and see that you can see how incredibly powerful people are taking things for granted. That we actually think that we're real, we're solid, and we're going to be here for a while. Probably not. More?
How do you find the courage to go against the teacher when you see that what you're seeing is not what was, it doesn't look like what was being pointed at?
Damn, I know, you plan on going against your teacher?
How do you confront the teacher? You know, we become students, and that's a very important relationship to have.
It is.
And at what point, or how do you present something that is opposing or apparently relatively opposing what the teacher
Well,
said?
it'd be a good idea not to go to war. It would be a good idea to discuss that with that teacher, that teaching person. Talk about it, say what's going on, rather than say, I disagree. Disagree with what you say, old man. Quite often when people do that, they just leave. If that does come up, they go somewhere else. And that's fine. I don't know what their path is about. More about that's a good question. Something specific you'd like to disagree about? Right here.
No,
What would you, what summons that kind of a question? What
I
is
don't
it?
know.
Okay.
It just came up. But kind of like you said, I've seen a lot of people leave.
Yeah.
Because they don't understand something, or they disagree, or,
Okay.
and just how do you?
They should, what I would say is this is why the teacher-student relationship, especially in this kind of situation, is very important. Because you ask someone to be your teacher, then you should really give them permission to work with you. And if you're not doing that, then don't even ask. Go do something else. And so, but if you do ask, then like I sometimes say, recently I've said, because I've had people do that, I said, I will function as your teacher, but if you want to leave for any reason, come and ask my permission to leave, and I will give you permission without a doubt, without even any questions, probably. And then I say, what's up? What's going on? And I would like a little bit of an understanding of it, but I would always say, okay. But to be able to do it that way, this allows you to be allows you to actually break the connection in a respectful and in a way that you don't, that particular, you've brought that to fruition, and it's time to do something else, to go another way. Whereas if you just leave and don't, and just react to something and just leave, then you're just setting up problems for yourself, not for the teacher, but for your own practice, your own awareness practice, because you think something is true there and you're rejecting it. And that's the nature of ignorance. More?
No, thank you.
So it's exactly noon. Any other, I could respond, or we could respond. Any questions for Union?
I have a question for you. How is doing this in front of everybody different than, say, the Shuso doing that? It seems like you're still having everybody watching your discomfort, and yet in the Shuso you seem to show a whole lot more anxiety, fear about doing it.
I'm the one asking the questions. That's the difference.
Anything else? Okay, very good. Thank you so much.
So we'll dedicate the merit at the back of your chant books. And we do have donation boxes at the back in the hallway, and online you can donate. May the merit of this penetrate into all places so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Jiho san shi shihu, shi son samoko sa, moko jao. The 10 directions, the 3 worlds, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna Paramita.
John,